Hello, it's finally here. So in this video, we're going to be talking about JWT authentication using Bun and Express. So if you want to learn about JWT, I have a separate video about it. I will add it in the card section, so you can go there. So let's get started with JWT authentication using Bun.js and Express.js. Okay. So to get started with, make sure you have Bun installed. So you can check if you've installed Bun or not by checking Bun-v. So I have Bun 1.0.2 installed. If you haven't installed it yet, then you can go to bun.sh and then you can follow this link to install Bun. So once you verify you have Bun installed in your application, you can go and run Bun init. Okay. So the package name, you can give anything. So for me, I'm giving JWT Learn with Pratap, and the entry point will be index.ts. Okay. So after running this, Bun has created few files for us. So this tsconfig.json is for TypeScript configuration, a readme file where it shows what exactly we have to do, and then a package.json file. So it's where we'll be adding our script dependencies, dev dependencies, and so on. And index.ts, so this will be the entry point of our application. So we'll be writing our Express app here. And then we have this bun.logb. This is in binary form. This is equivalent to our package log.json or yarn.log, and also a git ignore. Okay. So before we start, let's create a script here. Scripts, and let's add a dev script, and let's run bun --hot run index.ts. So what I mean by this is, when I run this script, I want Bun to run this index.ts file as a hot reload mode. That means whenever I make change into this file, it should automatically reload. Cool. So before we start our application, let's first install few dependencies. So we will be needing bun add express. So this has added our express package. So you can see package.json. We have our express dependencies here. And also we'll be needing the types for our express. So you can say bun add and the type / express. And then let's make sure we add this as a dev dependency. Should be -d. Okay. So now we've added our express type dependency. Okay. Now let's create an application. So we can say import express from express, and let's create an app. We can say const app equal to express, and let's create a new endpoint. We'll say app.get, and let's create an endpoint of shops, and this will provide us a request and a response. And here let's say res.json, and let me create a list of shops. So I can say const shops equal to list, and then here let me have a item. I can say name Kriti grocery, and let's have a username, and this will be Pratap. And let me duplicate this, and let me create another element, and let me have here Baskin Robbins, and this username will be Madhav. And let me create one more, and then let me have it here Annapurna tag, and the username will be Pratap. Okay, so with this we have list of shops. We have 3 shops, one with a Kriti grocery, the other with Baskin Robbins, and the other with Annapurna tag by different users. And now I want to return these shops. Okay, now it's time to add our listener. We can say app.listen. So let's run our server at port 3000, and let me have a callback where I'll mention console.log, and let me print server running on port 3000. Cool. So now it's time to test our application. So in order to test our application, let's first make sure we run this app. You can say bun run dev. So this will run our index.ts file in a hot reload mode. That means whenever I make any changes to this file, then our server will restart. Okay. And now it's time to test our endpoint. So there are multiple ways we can test this endpoint. So one is by using Postman, and the other is by using our extension REST client. So I have this REST client installed in my VS Code. Then you can use the same. Okay. So in this example, I'll be using REST client. So let me create a new file. Okay. So I've added this request.rest file, and let's start by adding get, and it will be http://localhost and shops. Cool. And if I send request, so we have all the list of shops. Cool, right? Since we are implementing JWT token form, so there are multiple endpoints which we'll be creating. One will be register, the other will be login, and the other will be refresh token. Okay, and to create a private endpoint, we'll be creating a middleware. Cool. So let's get started by having this register endpoint. So you can say app.post, and the endpoint will be register, and this will give us a callback of request response. Okay, so we have this register. So whenever we want to register, we'll be needing a username and a password. Let's say const, we'll get this user and a password from our body. So we can say request.body. Okay, so now we'll be having a list of users. So we can say const users is equal to an empty list, and then let's add users. Let's say users dot push, and let me add our, so this should be username, sorry. Let's have this username, and then let's add this password. Okay, and once we add this user to our users, then we can return the response. We can say response dot status of 200. Since we are registering in user, so 201 will be created dot JSON, and let me send the particular user. So I can say username. Okay, so with this I've created a register endpoint. So let's go to our request.rest. So if you want to add another request, then you can separate it by using pound or hash sign. And now let's have a post. It will be http localhost, and it will be register. Okay, and then the content type will be application JSON. Okay, so since we'll be sending a JSON request, so I need to add a middleware here. So I can say app.use, I can use express.json. So this will basically returns that only parse JSON and also look for a request where the content type here matches the type option. Okay, that means that whenever I have this JSON type, it will convert the content type of JSON to a JSON object. And now let's have our username, and let's say Pratap, and password. So you should always set a strong password. So let me set a strong password. So let me save, and let me send the request. So now we have created a new user, Pratap. Cool, right? So the same way, let's create a login endpoint. So we can say app.post. So since we'll be getting a request body from the client, so it will be a post method, and then it will be login. And as usual, this will give us a request, a response, and here I'll get the username and a password from the body. Okay, and now using this username, I need to find the user from our user list and compare the password, right? So I can say const user equal to users dot find, let's say core user. So basically, let's define a type for this particular user. So let's say type user equal to, then this user will have a username which will be of type string, and then it will have a password of type string as well. Okay, and then I can have here user list. Cool, right? So now I can compare the current user with the username. So let's say current user dot username, let me close this, it's equal to username. Okay, and let's check if we have that user. We'll say if. So if we don't find the user, so in that case we will return a response. So let me set a status. So this will be basically 404. We don't find the user, so we'll say send user not found. And now let's compare the password. So we can say if user dot password not equal to the password, then I can return a response with status 401 unauthorized dot send, and then I can say invalid password. Cool. So now it's finally time to login. So let me say response dot JSON, and then let me send the particular username. Okay, I'll add a message. So I'll say message logged in. Cool. So let me test this /login endpoint. Okay, so let's add a new request. So it will be of the same. So let me copy everything. So I just have to change the endpoint only. So this time it will be a login. always remember that we should first register and then we should log in. So let me send a request. Okay, I've created this user Pratap. So let me move this Pratap. So now this Pratap user should not exist. So let me send request. So it says user not found. Okay, and let me change the password and let me send the request. So it says invalid password. So now let me pass the correct password and let me send the request again. So now I get the user with username Pratap and the message logged in. Cool. So now it is time to introduce our JSON Web Token. So when should we introduce a token? So we should always create a token whenever we are logging in the user. So whenever a user logs in, then we will create a token, and on the subsequent request, based on the token, we will validate the user if that is a valid user or not. Okay. So now we want to have our JSON Web Token in our Bun application. So let's go back to our npm and we'll be using JWTs. So we'll be using JWTs. So this is basically a JavaScript module for JSON object signing and encryption, providing support for JSON Web Tokens, etc. So let's add this dependency. So we can simply say bun add JWTs. So I've added the dependency. Let's run the application again. Okay. So first of all, so let's create a function which will basically create a token. Okay. So let's say const get token is equal to, so here we'll be creating a token based on the payload. So let me first create this function. So basically this function will generate a token based on our payload. So this will have a payload. The payload will be of type JWT, let's say JWT payload. It doesn't add that. Okay, so let's import. We can say import star from, sorry, it should be star s JWTs from JWTs. Okay, so now it will be of type JWT payload. Okay, and then it will also accept a second parameter which will be expiry, and then this will be an optional and it will be of type string. Right, so now let's initiate our JWT. We need to initiate an object of sign JWT. So we can say const sign JWT is equal to JWT.sign JWT, and then this will accept our payload. Okay, and also let's set our header. So we can say set protected header. So we'll be using a certain algorithm. So we can say ALG, let's pass HS256. Okay, so we will check if there is an expiry. There's a typo, and we'll check if there is an expiry. You can say if expiry, then if there is an expiry, then we will set an expiry to this particular token. And I can say sign JWT dot set expiration time, and I can add the expiry. Okay, and now finally I can return the token. Right, so let me create a token. Token data is equal to sign JWT dot sign. So in order to sign this, I need to have our secret. So let's create a secret. I can say .env, and let's have a secret here. We can say JWT access token, and let's have a very secret key. So using this secret, we'll be signing our JSON token. That means whenever we want to verify if that token is created by us, then we'll be using this particular key again when we get the token in subsequent request. So let me copy this. If you can see sign, basically accept sign unit at array or just key like. So let's have a text encoder. We can say new text encoder. Okay, and let's encode, and let's pass our secret. We can say process.env.jwt access token secret. Right, and you can see the return type of this sign is basically promise of string. So I need to use await here, and since I'm using await here, I need to convert this function to an async. Since this returns a promise of string, then I can simply return this. Cool. Okay, so now when we successfully log in, let's create a token. We can say const access token, it's equal to get token, and now we need to pass a payload which will be basically our user, and then we need to set an expiry. So for now, let's set an expiry of 15 seconds, and since this returns a promise of string, I need to add await here. Okay, and now since I've add await here, I need to convert this to an async function. Okay, and now instead of returning all these things, I can simply return the access token. Cool. So let me go back to my request and let me try to log in. So it says user not found because I need to register first. Let's register, and now let's log in. Yay, we get an access token. Cool. So now we have the access token. It's time to protect our /shops, right? We want the user to access the /shops only if he is logged in. So for that we need to create a middleware. So let's create a middleware. We can say const check auth. So this will basically, this is a middleware. So this will accept 3 arguments. It will be of type request, response, and then next. Okay, so the request will be of type, it should be from the express and not from the bun, and the response also should be from the express response. Let's use the express, and let me close this again. And next will be basically a next middleware, okay, a next function. So now here we need to check if our token is valid or not and what data it contains. Okay, so before that, whenever I need to access my shops, I need to pass a token. Okay, so in order to pass a token, it's pretty simple. We can use an authorization. So we can say authorization, and it will be of bearer, and then we will pass the JWT token. So let me send a request, and let me copy this token, and let me edit here and save. So now beyond this point, I should be able to access these shops only if I pass a valid JWT token. So now I need to create this middleware, and I need to verify if that particular token is valid or not. Cool. So validating the token, it's easy. So let's create this middleware. So first of all, let's grab that token. So we need to grab the header first, and we can say const auth header is equal to request dot headers, and let's grab the authorization header. Okay, and let's get a token. We can say const JWT token is equal to auth header. If there's an header, so you can see when we pass the, so let me close this, I don't need that anymore. So you can see when we try to access this URL, when we try to send this request, we are basically passing this authorization header, right? And you can see we have this bearer and the token, and it is separated by this space. So that means I need to split by space, and then grab the second element. So that will be basically index 1. Okay, so now I need to check this token if it is valid or not. I say if not JWT token, then I can throw an exception here. I can say return, let me say response dot send status, and let me send the status of 401. Okay, so now it's time to verify the token. So let me say const, and let me grab the payload. So this payload will be basically the payload which we added when we log in. If you remember, this user was our payload, so we're trying to grab that particular user here. Equal to await, and then we'll use our JWT verify, and then here we need to pass the JWT token, and also our JWT authentication secret, which we added here when we use our get token. So let me copy this part, and then let me edit here. And since I've added await here, I need to convert this to an async function. Okay, so with this we can make sure that we have the payload. And also when we try to access this JWT verification token, so it may throw an exception like token has expired or something. So let's try to grab that. We can use try catch, and let me add that section here. And in case of any error, I can say response dot status of 41 dot send, and I can say error validating JWT token. Okay, so now it's time to have this payload add to our request. Then we can say request dot user it's equal to a payload. So this will give us a type error. So basically I can create a new type here. So I can say interface JWT request. It will extend our request, and it will basically have a user here, which will be of type user. So let me use this JWT request. So now this will not be a request because this request doesn't have any user there. So now I can have our JWT request, right? And it says that JWT payload is missing in the following properties because this payload is basically a JWT payload. So I need to convert this payload as a user. So I think it should not be user because user is a username and password, but a JWT user will have just it should not have all the information. So I did a mistake when I passed everything from this user. So you should have just a username only. So I can say username, user.username. So I've updated this. I should not add the password in the token, right? So let's go back here. I can grab the payload and I can use that payload in my user. Okay, and then I can call the next function. Good. So with this, I have created a check auth middleware which basically accepts 3 parameters: a request, a response, and the next function. And then now I want to add this payload as a user, as the information of the user. So that's why I've created a new type which basically extends our request, and we just created a user field here. Okay. And now it's time to have this check auth in my shops as a middleware. I can use it check auth and comma. So this will basically throw an exception because it says that user is required. So I can go and update my user to be an optional, because this may be present and this may not be present. Okay. And now I can access that user here. So I can say shops.filter. So let me just pass the only shops that belong to the particular user. I can say shop, and it should be shop.username if it matches my request.body. So now this request will be of type JWT request, and then I'll have the user there, request dot, it should be a user dot username. Okay, so you can see here, if you see this, it shows me suggestion of a password. So this should not happen, right? So I think I need to update my type, and then I think instead of user, like user is fine for this particular users list, and I need to create another user which will be basically of JWT user. I can say JWT user, and it will not have this password, it will simply have this JWT user. Okay, and then here will be JWT user. What I mean here is the user which will be present in the request will be of type JWT user, and this will extend. So since I need to extend, I cannot use type, I need to use a interface extends JWT payload. Cool. So now I have the username. So with this we have validated our /shops. So let's test our application. So first of all, if I try to send the request, it says error validating the JWT token because the token was already expired. And if I try to log in now, it says user not found because there is no particular user with this user. And now let's first register. Okay, I have registered, and let me send the request again. So the token is still invalid. So now let me log in. I get a new access token. So let me copy this, and then let me replace this access token, and let me send the request. Wow, amazing. So I get all the list of shops which were created by this particular user, Pratap. Cool, right? So what are the process we have done? So when we register, we add this user into our user list. And then when we log in, we check if that user is present in the user list. And also we compare the password if they are matching. And if we authenticate successfully, then we created a token and we have added a payload of username. And also we set an expiry of 15 seconds, and then we return the access token. And now on subsequent request, so when we try to get the shop, we are validating the token if it is valid or not. So in our check token middleware, we are basically grabbing the header, and then we grab the token. If the token doesn't exist, then in that case we are saying unauthorized, and then based on the token we try to verify the token. And once we verify the token, we get the payload from that particular token. And since we were adding only just the username, so now we have this payload, and now we add this payload to our request.user as a globally. So now wherever I get this request, I should get my user. Okay, and then I call the next function. And now wherever I use this middleware, so let's say if I hit this endpoint /shops, so it will validate our token and it will give me the user. And now here I should be able to access the user. And if the user exists and there's a username, and then we are getting all the shops only created by the user or owned by this particular user who is currently logged in. Okay. So here the next step is a concept of refresh token. So why do we need a refresh token? Because if you can see, when we log in, we have this access token and it expires in 15 seconds, right? But we should have a refresh token which will basically reauthorize a new access token. Okay, so now let's create a refresh token. So we can say const refresh token, it's equal to, let me simply copy this. And please note that when we create a refresh token, basically we don't pass this expiry. So we assume that the refresh token will not be expired. So since the refresh token will not be expired, we need to create a list of refresh token, which will basically, when the user logs out, then we will revoke this particular token. So for that, let me create a new list again here. So I will say const refresh tokens, then it will be of type string array. And initially it will be empty. Okay, so whenever I create this refresh token, I will add this refresh token to our list. So I can say refresh tokens dot push, and let me push this refresh token, and also let me return this refresh token. Okay, So let me go to my request again and let me register and let me log in. So at this point I should get a new refresh token, right? So I have now a access token and now I have a refresh token. So now let's say I want to refresh my access token, like I want to get a new access token based on my refresh token. So that should be pretty simple. Let's create a new endpoint. So it will be basically app.get only. We'll say app dot, it should be post method. We'll say app.post and we'll say refresh. Okay, and this will have the same thing. It will be a request, it will have a response. Okay, so now from the body I need to get my refresh token. I can say const refresh token is equal to request dot body dot, it will be of refresh token. Cool. So now I need to check if this token is valid. So the step should be same as we did in our middleware. Okay, so now I need to check if this is valid JWT token. So let me copy all this and let me edit here. So I have this try. So let me add the catch block, error, and then if there is any error, then I'll say response dot status, then I can say 401 and I can say send error with the refresh token. Let me close this, refresh token. Cool. So now instead of passing this JWT token, I need to pass the refresh token. Okay, and also before this I need to check if there is a refresh token. I can say if not refresh token. So I need to make sure this I have the refresh token. So let's say, let me return response dot set status of 401 and let me send, and let me have a message here, refresh token is missing. Okay, and then since I have this await here, I need to convert this to an async function, and I have the payload now. So based on this payload I need to create a new access token, and also I need to check if this refresh token is present in our refresh token list. So I can say if refresh tokens dot includes a refresh token, and if this refresh token doesn't present in our refresh token, then I can simply return a response. I can say return response dot status 403 dot send. So I can say here a refresh token not present in DB. Okay, based on this payload let me create an access token. So now I can say const access token equal to await get token, then I can pass the payload and let me set an expiry of 15 seconds again. And now I can send back this access token. I can say response dot JSON and let me send back this access token. Cool. So in this refresh token endpoint, what I've basically done is I pass this refresh token as a body, and then I check if the refresh token is present in the body. If it is not, then I throw an exception of refresh token is missing, and also I check if this refresh token is in my refresh token list. If it is not, then I throw an exception of refresh token not present in the DB. And now based on the refresh token I try to verify the JWT and grab the payload, and once I get this payload I create an access token based on the payload for the same expiry time 15 seconds, and then I return this access token. So let's test this again, and let me add a new endpoint, basically this, and instead of login it should be refresh now, and let me see if I have what I was expecting, a refresh token. So let me add a refresh token, let me remove all this. Okay, so with this, so let's test our endpoint again. So let's first try to register. So we have this Pratap, and now let's log in. So now I have this access token and a refresh token. So let me update this access token here. Okay, and then also let me copy this refresh token and let me place it here. Okay, and now let me try to grab this data. So it says error validating JWT token. I'm not sure if it is already 15 seconds. So let me try to log in again, and let me copy this access token and let me pass it here and let me send. Okay, so now I have the list of shops, and let me send again. So it's still working, and now the token is expired, right? So now based on this refresh token I want to generate a new token. So that means let me send request. Okay, I get this access token. Let me copy this and let me replace it here, and let me send the request again. So it's still working, right? So I don't have to re-log in again. So using the refresh token I'm able to grab the token. Okay, so but there's a problem, right? What if the user logs out? I need to somehow revoke this token, right? So that was the reason why I maintain this refresh token list here. So let me create an endpoint again. So this time it will be app.delete, and let me say logout, and as usual it will give me a request, a response. Let me quickly close this. Okay, and now when I log out, what I have to do now is I need to remove that particular token. Okay, so when I log out, I should expect that particular the refresh token. So let me get the token. So I can say const JWT token is equal to request.body.token. I should be const, sorry. And now I need to remove the refresh token. So I can say refresh tokens is equal to refresh tokens dot filter token not equal to JWT token. So since I said refresh token is a constant, I should update it to be a let. Okay, and now I can say response dot status of 200 dot send logged out. And also I need to make sure that I'm currently logged in. So I can say verify auth. I need to use the middleware check auth. So with this, I make sure that my logout endpoint is called by the current logged in user only. So let's test our application again. So first of all, let me try to get these shops. This time this token is invalid now. Let me register. I'm registering by username Pratap, and let me log in. I get an access token and a refresh token. So let me replace this. Okay, and let me copy the refresh token as well. So now let me try to get all the shops. So by the time I tried this, it was expired. So let me try to refresh token. I get a new access token. Then we copy this, and then let me have it here. And now let me send the request again. I get a list of shops. Okay, and now it's time to add a new endpoint, the logout endpoint. It will be of delete, and let me have this copy. Okay, and this time it should be logout, and it should be a token, and then here I need to pass the refresh token. Okay, so if I log out, so it says it is unauthorized. So I think I forgot to add the header. So let me copy this. So by the time I think it should be already expired. Okay, so let's test our application fully now. So let's start by logging in. Let's register. I have this username, and let's log in. I get an access token and a refresh token. So let me quickly replace this, and let me try to get the list of shops. Before that, let me copy this. So it is already expired. So let me refresh this, let me update the refresh token, and let me refresh the token. So I get a new token now, and then let me update this token, and let me try to grab the list of shops. I'm able to grab the shops, and also let me try to get the, now let me log out. I think it should be expired by now. Okay, so let me refresh it again. This is happening because I set an expiration of just 15 seconds. So for development purpose, I think you can make it a bigger, like 1 minute or 5 minutes, but it's okay. It's nearly complete. So I can refresh the token. Let me copy this, and let me have it here. Let me paste, and let me send. So we're successfully logged out. So now if I try to refresh this, so let me send a request. So it says refresh token not present in the DB. So that means whenever I log out, the refresh token was removed from the refresh token list. Okay. So basically these are all the endpoints, and this is the concept of JWT authentication. So you can see here, whenever we log in, so if we check our login endpoint, so whenever we log in successfully, we created an access token and a refresh token, and then based on the tokens, now we can get our shops. We have this check auth middleware, which will basically go and validate our token, and then based on the token, it will go and grab the payload. And once it gets payload, it will add to our request. And now in our subsequent request, we can access this JWT payload from where we set here. So in this case, we set this payload to our request.user, then we grab this payload from here. And then based on this, we can validate and authenticate our user using JWT. So I hope you got to learn a few things from here. And if you have any doubts or questions, please add it in the comment section below, and hope to see you in the next one.